Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations across the United States, and one of the first podcasts on the Internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1400, our annual Christmas special of This Week in Amateur Radio. Use of IRCs, International Reply Coupons, are scheduled to end in 2026. The Australian Communications and Media Authority moves to stop illegal radio imports. The mysterious Russian UVB-76 radio transmissions are still on the air. Amateurs worldwide get access to IP addresses. Google is planning to build a new undersea cable system. The FCC is planning to delete several Part 97 regulations on February 10, 2026. A new technician question pool is released. $25,000 is up for grabs in the 2026 Student Coding Competition. New satellite tracking software is released. And a large holiday gathering in Minnesota is kept safe by local amateurs. We will have the story coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benshoff, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio, presents Part 2 of his series entitled Building a Shack. In Part 2, Onno covers the topic, How Much Space Do You Need? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, is back this week with another chapter from the new series entitled Dead Electrical Dudes. This edition's stiff is Nikola Tesla. We will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and more. And we will have our annual Christmas special hosted by the late Gene Shepard, W2ORS, as he related what it was like to be a teen obsessed with amateur radio and trying to also have a girlfriend at the same time. This program taken from one of his talk presentations on WORAM in New York. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside of the metropolis of Albany, New York, I'm George, W2XBS.
Reporting from our studios in Orland Park, Illinois, where the dreary weather hasn't dampened our holiday spirits, I'm Mike Nicolich, N9OVQ.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where I just completed the ceremonial burning of the boxes and wrapping paper, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
Coming to you from a rather nippy but still sunny Space Coast in Florida, I'm Ed Johnsen, W2PH.
And reporting from a news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our New York News Bureau, where we're getting ready for a major snowstorm, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting this week from Cortlandville, New York, where I'm wondering if Santa's going to bring me a gift this year or a lump of coal. I guess we'll have to wait and find out. I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our blizzard-prone outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where it's beginning to look like we're going to get 8 to 10 inches of snow, with about 4 on the ground already. So, at any rate, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And if the lights stay on, we'll see you guys tomorrow. This is Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we've been experiencing a South Florida winter, but the real deal is coming soon, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, getting out the real winter gear.
Today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio is 100% human.
Leading off our news this week, Say goodbye to IRCs, the coupons that are still in use in parts of the world by hams requesting QSL cards. Although international reply coupons, or IRCs, are still being used by some DX-chasing hams in their requests for QSL cards, that option is set to end by this time next year. Countries belonging to the Universal Postal Union have voted to discontinue their use effective December 31st, 2026. That vote was taken in September at the 28th Universal Postal Congress held in Dubai. There are a number of IRCs already in circulation that bear the expiration date of 31 December 2025, and they are expected to be honored for one more year. In an era marked by a migration toward confirmations on digital platforms and in digital QSOs, the move brings an already disappearing amateur radio practice to its conclusion. A statement from the Universal Postal Union said the sunset of the IRC, first put into practice in 1907, was a natural progression within the broader transformation of international postal services in alignment with the digital practices and modern outlook of their customers.
The Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, has moved to stop unsafe mobile phones and other illegal radio equipment getting into consumers' hands with a new voluntary scheme aimed at online device sellers. Announced amid growing scrutiny on mobile phone emergency call reliability triggered by fatalities recently linked to 000 call issues, the scheme invites online retailers to take measures to block the sale of a range of dodgy radio communication devices, including gray market cellular handsets. The scope of radio communication devices that the Equipment Safety Pledge aims to capture is broad. It includes CBs, illegal transmission jamming devices, mobile phone boosters, and cellular mobile signal repeaters. However, it also includes gray market mobile phones, which have started to enter the increasingly volatile debate over the integrity of Australia's emergency calling ecosystem.
The Federal Communication Commission in October 2025 adopted a report and order to delete almost 400 obsolete rules pertaining to its wireless services. As previously reported by ARRL, among the deletions were 4 in Part 97 that govern the amateur radio service. ARRL reports that the notice of the report and order has now been published in the Federal Register. Unless an objection is raised by January 2nd that the Commission finds to deserve its consideration, the following 4 Part 97 provisions will be deleted as of February 10th, 2026. 1. Part 97.27. This provision is duplicative of a statutory provision related to the FCC's right to modify stations' licenses. 2. Part 97.29. This provision specified an obsolete procedure to replace paper licenses. ARRL proposed deleting this section in comments filed earlier this year. 3. Part 97.315, Subpart B, Paragraph 2. This obsolete provision grandfathered HF amplifiers purchased before April 28, 1978 by an amateur radio operator for use at that operator's station, and grandfathered those manufactured before April 28, 1978, for which a marketing waiver was issued. 4. And finally, Part 97.521, Subpart B, and Appendix 2. This rule and appendix relate to obsolete VEC regions.
On December 18, 2025, the National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinators, or NCVEC, Question Pool Committee released the revised 2026 through 2030 Technician Class Element 2 Question Pool. It will be required for all exam sessions beginning July 1, 2026. The new pool includes 409 questions, 27 new, 30 removed, and about 155 modified, compared to 412 in the prior pool. The pool also includes 3 diagrams used for some of the questions. The updated question pool incorporates significant changes compared to the prior pool. The questions were checked for technical accuracy and relevance to current amateur radio practices, as well as for grammar, syntax, format, clarity, and for redundancy within and between the pools. VECs and volunteer examiners must use test designs based on the new pool starting on July 1, 2026. Current ARRL VEC Technician Class Exam booklets, the 2022 series, and computer-generated technician class exams created from the 2022 question pool are valid until June 30th. After that, old versions should be destroyed. ARRL will have new editions of technician class study materials, including the ARRL Ham Radio License Manual, Gordon West Technician Class License Prep Book, and ARRL's Tech Q&A by May 2026. You can view all question pools on the National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinator website.
Bob McGuire, N4HY, has announced the release of a new satellite tracking application entitled Visible Ephemeris. Visible Ephemeris is a modern spiritual successor to QuickTrack, re-engineered for the Raspberry Pi 5 and modern silicon. It is capable of propagating 13,000-plus satellites in real time with sub-second updates while maintaining less than 5% CPU utilization. Visible Ephemeris is a high-performance physics-based program using Kelso Viardo SPG-4 to track satellites all in the Celestrak TLE. It uses McGuire's implementation of Pedro Escobar AOS-LOS search, but rewritten for altitude and not eccentric anomaly. The code is designed for and intended for Raspberry Pi and displays graphics components using Web UI. It features a hybrid decoupled architecture where the UI, orbital mechanics, and network services run on independent threads, ensuring the interface never freezes even during heavy calculation loads. Visible Ephemeris has been released under the MIT license, and further details can be found at github.com.
Pre-registration is now open for the ARRL Student Coding Competition, a new national challenge designed to engage young radio amateurs in shaping the future of amateur radio through software development. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more in this special report.
Open to ARRL member amateur radio operators aged 21 and younger, the competition will invite students to design a mobile app that supports ARRL and the amateur radio community. Cash awards totaling up to $25,000 will be presented to one or more winning entries. The competition officially begins on January 1st, 2026, when complete rules and application specifications will be released at coding.arrl.org. But participants are reminded not to start coding yet. Entries must follow the published requirements. Project submissions will be due by March 31st, 2026. ARRL adult members are also encouraged to help spread the word and support the next generation of amateur radio innovators. The ARRL student membership is free for full-time students aged 21 and younger, removing a key barrier to participation. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Entries will be judged on how well they meet the specifications, user interface design and usability, code quality and stability, and the inclusion of extra features. Young hams, educators, and mentors are encouraged to pre-register now at coding.arrl.org to receive updates as additional details become available and to prepare for this exciting opportunity to contribute lasting tools to amateur radio.
In March 2022, the AMSAT community lost one of our pioneers when Ray Seufer and W2RS became a silent key. In addition to his numerous contributions to AMSAT and the worldwide amateur satellite community, Ray was also a longtime organizer of AMSAT CW Activity Day, previously AMSAT Straight Key Night, held in conjunction with the ARRL's event on New Year's Day. In recognition of Ray's longtime service to AMSAT and his keen interest in CW operating via satellite, AMSAT CW Activity Day is now known as the W2RS Memorial AMSAT CW Activity Day. The rules are simple. Operate CW through any amateur satellite between 0000 UTC and 2359 UTC on January 1 of 2026. Straight keys and bugs are encouraged but not required. Logs are not required, but operators are encouraged to submit a report of their activity to the AMSAT BB. Photos and video clips of the activity are also encouraged. Post them on X or other social media networks with the tag @AMSAT or number AMSAT. Remember to use the minimum power required for communications, as constant carrier modes, including CW, can disrupt transponder operations for other users.
Early in the history of the Internet, the powers that be granted amateur radio operators over 16 million IPv4 addresses. Now a proposal has emerged suggesting that the same community be granted a substantial chunk of the IPv6 number space. The proposal to give amateur radio operators some IPv6 addresses emerged in an IETF draft that appeared in early November. It is not an official IETF position because anyone can propose a draft policy. Sole author Preston Lewis Ursini, who operates the Paducah Internet Exchange in Kentucky and participates in Internet policy development processes, points out that the amateur radio operators need an addressing system, and the IP4 block assigned to the community has done the job for years. Meanwhile, ARDC, the Amateur Radio Digital Communications, has launched 4Net Connect, a new portal designed to make it easier for ham radio operators to gain access to and experiment with the subnets of 44.0.0.0/8 IP address space. Through the portal, hams can apply for VPN access to 44Net, which comes with a dedicated 44Net IP address. Tunnel services are provided through WireGuard, with options to add IP networks and autonomous system numbers. Proof of ham radio license is required. Hams can get started at connect.44net.cloud. An overview of 44Net is available on the 44Net wiki.
In Russia, their mysterious doomsday radio station has sent out another series of ominous messages, sparking fears in Europe that the nation is preparing for a broader war. The radio channel, known as UVB-76, broadcast multiple transmissions in code last week, sending 3 signals on Monday, followed by 8 more on Wednesday. Each of the cryptic messages featured a set of numbers and letters, including complete code word. As many as 15 secret messages have been heard by listeners. However, their meaning and intended recipient have remained a mystery.
ARRL Straight Key Night, or SKN, is coming up soon. Every year on January 1st, Straight Key Night is on the air from 0000 UTC through 2359 UTC. This 24-hour event is not a contest. Rather, it is a day dedicated to celebrating our CW heritage. Participants are encouraged to get on the air and simply make enjoyable, conversational CW QSOs. The use of straight keys or bugs to send CW is preferred. There are no points scored, and all who participate are winners. All authorized amateur frequencies may be used, but activity has traditionally been centered on the HF bands. Logbook entries for Straight Key Night must be received by January 31st, 2026. Votes for Best Fist and Most Interesting QSO will be tabulated and included in the results. The 2025 SKN results indicated that 144 participants reported 945 contacts. While many were seasoned CW operators, some participants noted that they made their first CW contacts in many years during the 2025 event. All you need is your favorite straight key or bug. Many participants dust off vintage radios and keys and put them back into service each year just for this event. So get your fist ready, grab your key, and enjoy a fun New Year's Day on the air. For more information, visit Straight Key Night on the ARRL website.
A 2-day auction featuring hundreds of guitars and other memorabilia owned by longtime Eagles guitarist and solo star Joe Walsh, WB6 ACU, has brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars. The Life's Been Good Joe Walsh auction took place December 16th and 17th at the famous Troubadour venue in West Hollywood, California. Bidding also was held online. In addition to the guitars, the items that went on the block included motor vehicles, stage-worn clothing, recording equipment, keyboards, sales awards, amplifiers, furnitures, ham radio devices, road cases, t-shirts, and more. A portion of the proceeds from the auction will go towards Walsh's Vets Aid charity. The nonprofit disperses funds to various charities and organizations that support military veterans and their families. The item that brought in the money was a 2007 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500 sports car. The vehicle, which was owned and driven by Walsh, fetched $102,400. It had been estimated to sell between $70,000 and $80,000. Meanwhile, a 1955 Steinway & Sons grand piano that originally belonged to Les Paul sold for $57,600, Walsh had purchased the piano during a 2012 auction of those items from Paul's estate. Also selling was a 1970 ARP 2500 synthesizer, along with a keyboard and wing cabinet. Walsh used the instrument for recordings he did with his 1970s band Barnstorm and during his early solo career. Joe played the guitar during his 1975 Joe Walsh and Friends performance for Don Kirshner's rock concert, featuring his Eagles bandmates Don Felder, Don Henley, and Glenn Frey, and during the 1989 taping of an MTV Unplugged episode with Dr. John. You can check out the full list of items sold at the auction at juliansauctions.com. And for those of you who are wondering what Joe's Hammerland HQ145C shortwave radio receiver went for, well, the sold price was $1,600.
Are you an experienced operations leader who is passionate about delivering exceptional membership services and driving commercial growth? Or are you an advertising agent looking for a new opportunity where you can demonstrate your strong sales capabilities, excellent communication skills, and your ability to build and maintain long-term client relationships? The Radio Society of Great Britain is seeking a full-time, highly motivated operations manager to be part of its senior leadership team based at the RSGB headquarters in Bedford, UK. This is a key role responsible for ensuring our members receive outstanding service, and the successful candidate will need to be commercially astute, organized, people-focused, and excited by the opportunity to make a meaningful impact. The Society is also looking for a new contractor or agency to work with to support the development of RSGB advertising and contribute to the growth of its publications and digital platforms. If you are a professional, proactive, and excited by either of these opportunities, go to the RSGB website to find out more. The application deadline for both is January 4th, 2026.
A reminder this week, don't forget the regional amateur radio educational event taking place on Long Island, New York, Ham Radio University, which, appropriately enough, is taking place on a university campus. Long Island University Post Campus will be once again hosting the all-day program on Saturday, January 10th. Now in its 27th year, Ham Radio University draws amateurs from around the region and also serves as the Long Island Section Convention for the ARRL. This year's featured speaker will be Adrian, Kilo Oscar 8 Sierra Charlie Alpha, who has been preparing for a return trip to Bouvet Island as co-leader of a 24-member team. The day's offerings will include 23 forums and, of course, a discussion about parks on the air, Morse code, and STEM education. The date is coming up fast. Admission is free, but a $10 donation is suggested. Visit hamradiouniversity.org for more details.
Exactly 1 year ago, ham radio stations were established in 20 residential schools in disadvantaged areas of one southwestern state in India. A year later, teachers and their students have become a small, thriving amateur radio community thanks to these small digital mobile radios, or DMR. The challenge of teaching science and communication to disadvantaged students in the Indian state of Karnataka got a big boost 1 year ago when Karnataka Residential Educational Institutions Society turned 20 of its schools into ham shacks. Some of the teachers became hams and, in turn, guided their young students in grades 6 through 12 along the way. 40 students became hams and were soon using the DMR handheld radios, participating in the daily net and connecting to the world. More broadly, with the installation of DMR base stations by the Indian Institute of Hams, the schools themselves became communication hubs that could be used when natural disasters knocked out conventional means of contact in their remote rural communities. The past year has been one of challenge and innovation for Shirin VU3DBO, one of the 20 teachers in the school system who received her ham radio certificate from the Ministry of Communication. The science teacher wove the radio curriculum into the classes, where she also taught about energy, technology, the environment, and space. Perrine went on to say in an email that the hands-on STEM learning, the expanded communication skills, and the exposure to teamwork has sparked the students' curiosity and built confidence over the past year. She said amateur radio was a wonderful hobby, fun in a hands-on way.
Google will build 3 subsea cables in Papua New Guinea, which is the largest Pacific island nation, said funded by Australia under a mutual defense treaty in a key upgrade to its digital backbone. Australian and U.S. military strategists view resource-rich but largely undeveloped Papua New Guinea as having a prized location north of Australia at a time when China is boosting its influence in the region. The $180 million-plus effort will link northern and southern Papua New Guinea and the Bougainville Autonomous Region with high-capacity cables, said PNG's acting Minister for Information and Communications. The entire investment, funded through Australia's commitments under the Puk-Puk Treaty, he said in a statement, referred to a mutual defense pact signed in October. Google said last month it planned to build a data hub on Australia's Indian Ocean outpost of Christmas Island, and another strategic defense location, with new cables linking the island with Australian cities hosting key defense bases also used by the U.S. military. 2 or more cable systems will extend westwards to Africa and to Asia to deepen the resilience of American ocean internet infrastructure, Google said.
DXLook has released a new DRAP, or D-Region Absorption Prediction View, that helps amateur radio operators understand and visualize HF absorption caused by solar X-ray flares in real time. D-Region absorption is a major cause of sudden daytime HF blackouts, particularly on lower frequency bands. DXLook's new DRAP view presents existing D-Region absorption data in a band-aware geographic format, allowing operators to visually assess where and on which HF bands absorption may be occurring at a given moment. The DRAP view is primarily driven by official data from the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center using the global frequency for 1 decibel absorption product based on GOES satellite X-ray measurements. This dataset identifies for each region of the Earth the highest HF frequency expected to experience significant D-layer absorption at the current time. When NOAA data is unavailable or becomes outdated, DXLook automatically switches to a physics-based fallback model derived from real-time solar position calculations. The system clearly indicates when calculated data is being used instead of measured NOAA data, ensuring transparency for users. Absorption regions are displayed as smooth color-coded zones aligned with amateur HF bands, allowing operators to quickly assess which frequencies may be degraded. The DRAP view integrates with DXLook's existing MUF, spot, and propagation tools, helping users understand the full operating window between D-layer absorption at lower frequencies and ionospheric refraction limits at higher ones. The new DRAP view is especially useful for contest operators, DXers, and emergency communications groups assessing HF reliability during solar events, as well as for operators trying to understand sudden shortwave fadeouts during daylight hours. The DRAP view is now live and available to all users on dxlook.com. DXLook is a real-time HF and VHF propagation visualization platform built by amateur radio operators for the amateur radio community. It combines live reception reports, space weather data, and physics-based modeling to help operators better understand band conditions and propagation behavior worldwide.
The amateur radio software developed by Jim Schaefer, KE5AL, gave hams who are blind the ability to control and monitor their HF rigs without needing a sighted person's assistance, providing the freedom of independent operating in their shacks. The retired IBM software engineer knew that operating challenge all too well as he was blind since birth. Jim became a silent key on December 2nd. According to his online obituary, the Texas resident died of complications from Parkinson's disease. Jim's well-known applications, JJ Radio and JJ Flex Radio, attracted attention for their promise of accessibility when used with many different radio models. His development of the free programs brought him to the attention of host Hap Holly, KC9RP, host of The Rain Report, which features an interview with Jim. Hap, who became a silent key earlier this year, had also been blind since birth, and like Jim, also supported the Handy Ham program, which trains and serves the community of hams with disabilities. Non-hams in Central Texas also knew Jim well for his other deep involvement. He was a versatile musician and popular fiddler in a number of music groups, including the Piney Grove Ramblers. Jim was 72.
Season's greetings. This is W2XBS. I would like to take a moment to wish all of our affiliates and listeners across the country and around the world all of the best of the holiday season. And as our present to you, now that we have you all up to speed on the latest news, please sit back and enjoy one of the nation's best storytellers talk about being a kid and getting on amateur radio. Now, for your enjoyment, here is Gene Shepard, the late K2ORS, as heard on one of his broadcasts on WOR Radio in New York during the mid-1960s.
I'm for Gene Shepard, author, raconteur, and commentator on the contemporary scene. Here's Gene.
I remember very cleanly and distinctly the excitement that Friday night meant. It's a fantastic, it always will. Even to guys who are not in school, who are still not 15, Friday night is a special, peculiar kind of a dangerous night. And what it meant to me, I have to admit one terrible thing. At one point in my life, what it really meant to me was Friday night was the one night that I could keep my ham station going until dawn. I did not have to get up early in the next morning. Even my paper route did not work early morning Saturday. The paper was not delivered on Saturday morning. I made my collections Saturday afternoon, but I could stay up all night. And I'd come home from a date, you know, the whole scene. I'd have the whole bit going. And about 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, I'm with this girl. We're having a malt, you know. We're sitting in the drive-in watching Charlie Chan or some other big opus of the period. I can hardly wait, you know. I keep hearing it in my mind. I keep hearing the CQs on 40. I said, oh, boy, there must be, gee, about now, the West Coast must be coming in. Right about now, the W6s are starting to pound into the 9th District. And here I am sitting with Esther Jane, you know. And, Esther Jacobs saying, gee, what, a penny for your thoughts. And I'd say, yeah, well, a penny for my thoughts. What'd you say? What? She'd say, a penny for your thoughts. And I'd think for a minute, and I'd say, shall I tell her about that pi section network I was thinking of in my mind? This pi section network, I got a terrific idea to change the standing wave ratio on my 600 ohm feed, on my 40 meter zep. Shall I tell her about that? And then it would come out, you know, and I'd say, yeah, okay. And I'd say, you know, Esther, what I was thinking of, that there is in the handbook, in the ARRL handbook, there's a terrific section on pi section networks. And I wonder if you'd like to go home with me, and the two of us will build a pi section network that will reduce the standing wave ratio on the 600 ohm feeds to my 40 meter. And by that time, I'd see her drifting away. And she'd be looking out of the front window of the car now, and she's watching Charlie Chan again. I'd say, what's the matter? What's the matter? Just think of the fun we could have together. You could hold the solder, and I could take the soldering irons. And I'd say, give me the solder. Quick. Come on. Now put a plier down there. Hold it on that terminal there. Psst. Oh, boy, would we have fun. And there'd be this long, pregnant silence. And I recognized that once again, Mighty Casey had struck out. And I could not, I knew then there were certain things that you just didn't talk to chicks about. Pi section networks, you do not discuss mercury switching systems with chicks. You do not discuss a Class C final with a chick. And you don't even discuss the ineffable mysteries of the universe of that kind with a girl. And I remember one period I was plunged into a profound funk, a real funk. And oddly enough, just the other night, I'm looking in the newspaper. I'm sitting there, and I'm down at the Horn and Hardart, you know, and I got my egg cup in front of me and a big cup of Horn and Hardart's coffee, and I'm just casually going through the paper. And it was a paper that I found there. It was on somebody's table. I'm just going through it, and suddenly, Skip, a name hit me. A name just stuck right out of the headlines there. Now, we're used to big, you know, regular names like President Johnsen, Dean Rusk, and Charles de Gaulle, Mickey Mantle and stuff. It was a name? I says, no, it can't be. It can't be. And it was an obituary. And sure enough, there it was, the name of a man who probably nobody in the entire Horn and Hardart, probably, I would say, anybody on 6th Avenue at that moment, sitting in coffee shops, sitting in H&H's and sitting in Bickford's, wherever they might be, if I ran from one of those tables to the other and says, look who died. Look at the name. Do you remember the name? The name would mean nothing to them. To how many of you does the name Heising mean anything? Did you ever hear of Heising modulation? Heising modulation. You know, there aren't many men in any field who give their name to an entire system or an entire formula or a new discovery. You know, like the Salk vaccine. We all know the Salk vaccine. Dr. Salk's name will be familiar and will be famous for generations, the name Salk vaccine. We know about Freud, you know, the Freud dream analysis ideas and Dr. Freud's hypotheses and so on. We know about Einstein's theory of relativity. Well, Heising lived over here in Jersey. He died just a couple of days ago. And I caught the name, and it was connected with one of the peculiar, long, blue funk moments I've ever had in my life. The Heising system of modulation is a system of AM amplitude modulation. Now, you're listening to me, in most likelihood, if you're listening to 710 on your dial, I know you are, you're listening to amplitude modulation. That's AM radio. The other kind of radio is connected with another man. That's the FM radio. What's the name of the man, really, who was generally credited at being the genuine developer of FM radio? Come on, who is it? What kind of an engineer are you, for crying out? You know who it is. Why, he was there. Isn't that sad? The great men of our time, hardly any. Major Armstrong. Oh, for heaven's sakes. He also was involved in the superheterodyne theories. That's another thing. There was a great man. But the name Heising, it became so mystical, so involved in my life, like a Colpitts oscillator, for example. I wonder if old man Colpitts, who invented a certain type of oscillator, knew that for years and years and years there would be a little diagram in question and answer manuals, in ARRL handbooks that would say Colpitts oscillator. Now, I'm not talking to you about radio here, so don't get bored here. I'm talking to you about something else. Can you imagine your name, let's say Witherspoon or Oschenschlager? Let's say if there were textbooks to be printed for 100 years from that, and it would say Oschenschlager's Law of Rottenness. And forever and ever, people would know the name Oschenschlager, and it's not even a man anymore. It's just a name. It's a name. Heising was not a man to me, and I was astounded to find a Mr. Heising died. And I read the obit, and it was the one. It really was the Heising who had created this system of modulation. Well, let me tell you, speaking of bad modulation, this is WOR AM and FM New York. Now, I'm not going to go into a technical description of what the Heising system of modulation is. I could go into that. That's for next semester. We won't do that tonight, but I will tell you this, that I am now on CW. See, I'm a kid. I'm about 14 years old. I'm a ham. And my whole life is connected with this stuff. And of course, I was also involved in other things, like I'm playing football, and I'm playing second base, and I'm going out with Esther Jane Alberry, and I'm going out with Dawn Strickland, and I've got all the chicks going. You know, the whole scene is a gigantic fruitcake of existence. And connected with all of it, of course, and somehow weaving through it in this tapestry, was this thing of back home in the front bedroom, my shack. And this was my special place, my shack. You know, the day bed is over here, and the windows are over here. And the shack was a bedroom we did not use. It was my shack. And I had this old table that I had bought from the Salvation Army for $1. And I'd cleaned it, and I'd put Formica on the top of it and polished it. I had a little vise on the side of it, you know, and I had the desk drawers all cleaned out, and I had compartments in there where I had resistors and condensers, and I had the whole scene. I had a clipboard off to the left where I kept my log sheets and my plate readings and my grid drive readings and all that. And I had a rack. I had a 4.5-foot rack that I bought. I bought it in an old used radio store, a place where you buy old radio junk, you know. And I bought this rack. It was a big 4.5-foot rack, and it had big 19.5-inch panels across it. And in it, this big 4.5-foot rack, which was a great big piece of iron, I had a 10-watt transmitter. That was the joy, the light of my life. It was CW, and every night when all the other kids, were sort of just hanging around the living room and walking around picking their teeth and crying and whining and looking out of the window and yelling down the hot air register, the stuff that kids do, I would be in the front bedroom in my shack with my key. The time that Uncle Tom gave me that key, I will forever remember. He gave me an old beautiful railroad key with a sidewinder, a real key, see. And I would be down there at maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I'm on there with my cans, my Brandy's earphones hanging on my head, and I'm on 40 meters. My 6L6 is laying it down on 40, and I'm right there in the middle of the band. 7182 was my Bliley X-Cut crystal. And I am number one on 7182. And my rig had such poor voltage regulation, Skip, that the entire house, when I would press the key down, the lights would go whoo, 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 whoo. And about every 10 minutes, my old man would come, bang, will you cut out that? I can't even read now already. I'd say, okay, Dad, all right. I'd sit there and then I'd go, wait for a couple of minutes. I wait till, you always wait till the ripples sort of die down. And the talk builds up again out there, and then I go, few little V's, I am laying it out on 40. So this is my whole life. I walk around the streets with Esther Jane or with Helen Weathers or with Dorothy or one of the chicks I was going with, and I would hear a horn. A car would go past, you see. And I'd hear that old horn blow. You always hear this. If you're a real CW man, you hear it, and you can never get rid of it. You hear it all the time. I stand next to subway trains right now on 59th Street, and they come along, and I hear the doors rattling and everything, and I hear them. They say things in code. He goes past roaring out a CQ, It's the AA train. I can hear a CQ just as plain and easy, I'm walking down the street with Helen Weathers or with Dorothy Anderson, and I hear the horns, the horn goes. Some guy sends a K. I turn around and go. And there's a dull silence there. And then I'd hear obscenities. I'd walk along and somebody'd send an obvious obscenity. He doesn't know he's doing it, He just said, I'd dig Dorothy, and I said, you hear what he said? She said, what? And, of course, the word got out that I was kind of a nut. Kids who do things that all other kids don't do are always kind of looked upon as the nut, the crowd. Well, about that time, it was maybe about a year after I got on CW. And I was going up for my Class A examination. Now, this is a special exam that you take that involves amplitude modulation. It's about telephone, radio telephone, this whole business that we're involved in right now. You and I, you're listening to me on a radio set. I'm talking to you on an amplitude modulation transmitter and so forth. Well, that was that whole theory, diagrams, and the whole business. And there was one special section called the theory, the adjustment, and the maintenance of the Heising modulation system. And I got involved in that. Somehow I began to dig this system. It had a nice symmetry about its diagrams. It was somehow I dug at the theory of the Heising system. Don't ask me why, I can tell you now. One thing, it's cheaper than most other systems. And I began to dig this Heising modulation system. And then I began to go down to the old surplus radio stores, and I began to look for chokes, filter chokes and stuff that I could use to make this Heising system. And it became almost the next big goal. As we all live in our lives, whatever little life we have goals achieved and goals about to be achieved, and we have goals we're aiming at. All the time. So a guy may live during a certain period in his life, and his idea is get a boat. And he walks around the street and he thinks about boat. Or he may have this thing, get a promotion, get to be the chief clerk, get to be the chief clerk. And he thinks about this all the time, get to be the chief clerk. Other guys have the thing, I'm going to make money on the AT&T. I'm going to make dough. You see, the reason we dig horse racing and the stock market and that kind of thing is because you can see goals achieved And also goals failed. That's part of it. And so each day is a whole series of little goals. Gee, if I can only get away to get a cup of coffee. Holy smokes, if I can only get away, get a cup of coffee. Oh, wow. And you go for about a half an hour, so you're working away there, and then all of a sudden you say, I'm going to go and get a cup of coffee. And boom, the next thing you know, you're sitting down there at that good old chock full of nuts, and the coffee's out there, and a goal has been achieved. A goal has been achieved. Bing, it's big, you know. It's there, you see. And there I was beginning to develop this thing, and Heising modulation. Now, I know this means nothing to you, but millions of hams are listening, and they're saying, yeah, man, yeah. Well, at that same time, there was a girl that I was really hung up on. I don't even remember this girl's name. It was one of those brief, momentary things, you know, where you get hung up on a chick. I remember she had dark hair, and she had sort of pink, light-type skin, and I remember she lived on the north side of town. And I remember I used to ride over there about every second day with my Elgin bicycle, like mad through the gloam, just to look at her house, you know, that kind of thing. Just to ride past her house once in a while, like, hey, look out! She'd never look out. But once in a great while, I'd see her at the tennis court, that kind of thing. I had a big hang-up on this chick. And at the same time, I had a hang-up on Heising modulation. Well, one day, I'm in this store, this old junky store that we used to go to. I'm down in the Ace radio shop. It's a crummy old lousy radio shop. They have millions of piled up turntables of old disreputable types, you know, wound for Bulgarian capitals, special types of winding that only work on 6.5 volts or some nutty thing like that, or 18 1/3 volts, all kinds of crazy equipment. And I came across the transformer. It was perfect for my Heising modulation. Well, I had about $1. That was about as much as I could go. And old Sam, back at the counter there at the Ace radio shop, is looking me right in the eye, and he says, $1? Are you kidding? Do you realize it's a 300 mil transformer? What are you talking about, Mac? You don't find many of them anymore. That's a 300 mil Thor Darson transformer. And I'm there, confronted with it. Well, that night I had a date. I had $1. This son of a gun wanted $2.50 for this transformer. Now, I had probably a total stake at the time of about $3, of which $1 was to go for a transformer that day, or something else. Maybe I wanted to buy whatever I was going to get was going to be $1, see. I figured $2, well, we'll go down to the Orpheum, me and this chick, and it'll leave us enough to get a hamburger over at Miner and Dunn's. And, well, you know, it'll work out pretty good. I'll maybe squeak by with an extra quarter or two. I had it all figured out. Well, Sam looked me in the eye. I looked Sam in the eye. And right there on that counter in front of us, it was laying right there. Now, this is the curse that all men have had to face all their time. All men I know. Is it going to be a boat? Or... Oh, yes, indeed. I don't think chicks have these kind of decisions to make quite as often as men. They may in the future. But men always have these little things, you know. They do. They have to decide whether or not to be a social animal or a rotten, crummy, selfish animal. Now, usually they devise it in such a way in their mind to be both. And so the guy will say, well, if I buy this transformer, I will be a happier person to be with. Not only that, I will be more fulfilled. And then I could certainly be able to fulfill my role with Esmeralda much. But actually, I'm investing in her if you look at it in a certain way. If you look at it a certain way, in a certain light, that the best thing I could do for her would be to buy this 300 mil Thor Darson transformer and build up my Heising modulation system, and from there on in it would be hotsy-totsy. That's the way my mind went. So 5 minutes later, I am going home with this big transformer under my arm. Oh, that excitement, you know. I had all the other stuff, you know. I was all ready to go. And that afternoon, I'm building and soldering, getting this thing going. You know, I got the diagrams out, and I'm working down the circuit values, and I'm hinching a little bit. You know, I got a couple of things where it says 0.2 microfarad condenser. I got a 0.1, little things like that all the way down. I'll make it work, The resistor that it should have been, let's say, 1,500 ohms. I had one that was 2,700 ohms. That's close enough for jazz, So, well, anyway, it's now about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, thereabouts. And I have built my first modulator. I don't know whether you know the excitement, friends. I don't know how I can transmit this to you. Of going on the air for the first time on your transmitter. Now, I'm not talking about CB. This is nothing. This is kid stuff. Come on. None of that junk. And by the way, many people today confuse amateurs for CBers. They're totally different animals, completely. There is no parallel between... a CBer bears about the same relationship to an amateur as a little grandmother riding along the West Side Highway in her 47 Plymouth bears to Sterling Moss. It's about the same, isn't it? Roughly, yeah. They ain't at all the same thing. Don't confuse them at all. And so I've got this Heising modulation system all done. I've got a 6L6 tube in the final. I got a dummy load on it. And I'm all set to try it out, test the whole thing out. I got the microphone. I got a single-button carbon mic. Put the gain on, turn it all on. And then I stand back with the mic, and I'm ready to go. And I've got I was using to test my modulation system, I have a 2-watt neon bulb, which I could see it was about as close. And, of course, I had a milliammeter, I had an ammeter in the plate and so on. And so she's heating up. Slowly, I apply the plate voltage. I had a variac, and I'm applying the plate voltage to my final. She's now up to 700 volts. A lot of voltage on that poor old 6L6. She's a bright, brisk cherry red, and I said, well, maybe I'll back it down a little bit. I go down a couple of notches, and I got about 500 volts on the plate. And then I switch in my Heising modulation. And there's one moment, just a moment of pause, when suddenly, without any warning, it goes... I get this fantastic chatter in my transformer. I back it down. I look at it. Wait a minute. I turn off the switches. Get out the diagram. I'm checking it over here. Check. Everything checks out. Yes, indeed. Let's see here. Well, maybe I had just too much gain on the input there. Maybe she was overloading. Motorboating. That's it. She's probably motorboating. So I turn it on again. I stand back and wait. And everything in my 6L6s glow, this nice cherry glow, and I turn up the gain a little bit. Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello. Hello. Ooh, for crying out loud. I back it down a little bit. Hello. By the way, Mr. Heising was doing this to me, in case you don't know it. The man who just passed into the great beyond over in Jersey. Hello. And it was the first time that I'd ever encountered one of the major curses of mankind, downward modulation. Now, that means nothing to your friends. Except, suffice it to say, that when old Shep talks to you here, the transmitted signal of WOR goes up. As my voice goes up, the transmitter, the signal goes up. Well, my transmitter was working the opposite. As I would talk into it, it would go down. And I'm holding the thing up there. Hello. And now it's getting about 7 o'clock, see. Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, what a curse. And I could not get... And by that time, I decided, well, there must be something wrong. I'm not checking it right, so I'll call CQ. Hello, CQ. And I'm tuning back. Hello, I'm on 160, in case you're interested in the band. Hello, CQ, hello. And I stand by. And immediately a guy comes back right on the frequency. Gong! W9QWN. Hello, fantastic signal. W9QWN. This is W9XXX standing by. Do you hear me, old man? W9XXX, yeah, this is W9QWN here. You're Q5R9 Plus here, old man. The handle here is Shep, S-H-E-P, Shep. Handle here is Shep. We're running a single 6L6, about 10 watts, Heising modulation, modulated by a single 6L6 here, and a single button carbon mic. I'm using a 40 meters up with the okay, W9XXX, W9QWN standing by. that signal comes back. W9QW1. This is W9 triple X. I recognized him as one of the great famous hams of the area. You know, it's like talking. It's like if you're an aviation nut and all of a sudden you're hooked up with Lindbergh. You know, I mean, you're down at the flying club and you two are discussing flying together. You know, and he comes back to me and he says, "What'd you say the handle was? I don't remember working you before. I just thought I'd call you. You're messing up the band. You're lousing up the frequency here. It sounds to me like you've got a little downward modulation, and I don't think you're final. It sounds a little bit like you have a lot of parasitics there. And not only that, it sounds to me just a little bit like your neutralization is way off, man. Just thought I'd call you. I didn't want to get involved in any long rag chew. You better look into it, old man, and I'm going to QRT now. I think I'll pull a switch, and don't bother to come back. You sound rotten. Don't bother to come back, old man. It's all right, fellow. Your signal here is about, I'd say, around a Q2 to 3, about an R2. Well, that meant that he had to turn up everything he had just to hear me, and when he did turn it up to hear me, I was just rotten. And so he just, boom, he's gone. I'm sitting. Icing modulation, eh? Yeah, I turn it on again. I take my neon bulb. This time I put the dummy load in. See, I'm not going to radiate all over the band, and I get on there. Hello. It keeps flickering downward. It's now 8:30, 8:45. My chick has been waiting for me since 7. It's at 7 o'clock. Well, I finally realize, you know, this way lies madness. In this way lies the antisocial animal. And once you have committed yourself to the antisocial animal, forever you'll be down in some dank basement, surrounded by half-empty ball jars full of nails. The rest of your life will be given over to this insanity, whatever it is. I knew that even then, as an animal. I knew even then that hang-ups can devour you. And so, about 8:45, I looked at this thing. I says, okay. I turned it off. And 15 minutes later, I am picking up this chick. And 10 minutes after that, we are on our way to the Aragon. We are on our way to this place where they had these terrible bands and stuff, see? And all the way on up, all I could think of was downward modulation. All I could think of, it was like I had failed as a man. I wonder, it's too bad that Tennessee Williams doesn't write plays about the things that really get guys going, that really get guys hung up. I have known guys for 2 solid years to be eaten up inside. I mean eaten up. Where they yell at their chicks, they threaten to kill their daughters, they take a shot at their boss because of one thing. They get rotten gas mileage. They're getting 8 miles to the gallon. And it burns them up every time they go into that gas station. You know, they bought this monster, and it takes 14 gallons of gas just to get to town and back. It's like Ahab and that whale, you know. And so we are on our way to the Aragon Ballroom. Well, have you ever danced with a chick when you got a Heising system of modulation on your mind with downward modulation and also a bad problem with parasitics? All the time I'm hearing parasitics in my mind. And parasitics are awful things. They're like little, well, when you hear parasitics on the air, you know it. It's like a swarm of awful, angry, sort of somehow debauched, erotic locusts. They surround your signal. It's a fuzzy signal. If you could tune past WOR and it sounds like a shaving brush that's been drinking, that would be like my signal was on 160, and I'm bugged. Well, on the way home, after about, at least 4 hours of dancing, it seemed like 4 hours, went on endlessly, back and forth we're going. We're on our way home, and she turned to me, and she says, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I said, what? Already, you see, I was back in my shack. You know, I was sitting next to this chick in the Western Avenue car, but I'm already back in the shack, you know, and I've got an idea. I'll tell you what it is. It must be the cathode. It must be my cathode biases. That's it. I'm thinking, oh boy, I can hardly wait to get home. I'm going to change that resistor in there. I know what it is. I know. Oh, what a fool, what a nut. And she says, now, come on. She says, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you're one of the worst people that I've ever dated. I said, what? I don't make passes or anything. I'm a nice guy, you know. I took her out there. She said, you're one of the worst people I've ever dated. And she says, not only that, she says, but I think that your mother ought to take you to a doctor. I think you're unhealthy. Unhealthy? It never occurred to me that having a hang-up on a cathode follower circuit or having a hang-up on Heising modulation was somehow a perversion. It was a sickness. I said, well, unhealthy. I mean, I play football, all that stuff. What do you mean unhealthy? Now I'm getting a little bugged with it. What do you mean unhealthy? Anybody with the kind of skin you got should holler about unhealthy, for crying out loud. She says, well, I don't care. She's bugged. Oh, a woman scorned even at the age of 14 is hell on wheels. That's all I got to say. So I'm saying, well, what do you mean unhealthy? She says, well, I don't think you even talked to me once tonight. I said, what do you mean talk? You didn't I buy an orange drink? I bought you knee-high. I talked. I said, I asked you if you wanted another one. I remember that. I said, it was fun. I remember telling you it was fun. She said, you did not talk to me once all the time we were at the Aragon. Long pregnant pause. I said, what am I going to talk to you? What? Do you know anything about downward modulation? She says, what? I said, well, I've got worries. I'm worried. Can't you tell I'm worried? Nothing is more worried than a guy who is building something and it hasn't worked. I can tell you this, it drives you out of your skull. I said, I'm worried. And we rode all the way home on the Western Avenue car in silence. Got to the end of the line, took her home, says goodbye. Just goodbye. That was the end of that. I took off like a big speckled bird. I'll tell you, I didn't think of her 8 seconds off. I'm over the privet hedges I'm going, you know. I'm flying all the way home with my wings going, you know. Wow! Woo! Up the front porch. Boom! In. Pow! Into the front bedroom. Goom, goom, goom. The switches are going on. The old man sitting out in the front room there listening to the A&P Gypsies or something, you know. And I got all the switches turned on, everything going, waiting for it to heat up. I got the soldering iron heating up, and I've got the solder out there, and I have got that 2 microfarad condenser, which I should have put in the very beginning in the cathode. It hit me halfway through Red Sails in the Sunset. What the problem was. Halfway through, I says, what's the matter with me? I got a 1/10 condenser in there. It should have been at least a 2 microfarad. I'm soldering this thing up, you know. Boy, I heat this baby on. There, I got the microphone going. Dummy load. All right, let's see. Putting in a little grid drive there. Now she's doing real good. Ooh, bah. I tuned the final plate. Ooh, what a dip. I'm tuning that final tank now. Ooh. Yeah. Advance the gain a little bit here. Hello, 1, 2. Oh, what a beautiful sight. What a beautiful sight. My milliammeter in the final plate is ticking up. Ever so slightly. Ting, 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 ting. Up, she's working perfectly. I take my neon bulb. Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, 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 hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello. Beautiful envelope. Magnificent signal. Pow. Out comes the dummy load. In goes my 600 ohm ZEP V. Boom, boom. I'm tuning her up. Oh, man. Up to the full 10 watts. Hello, 160. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello, CQ. Hello, CQ. Look at that meter flicking up in there now. Look at it. Right behind your head, Skip. Look at that beautiful sight. Hello, hello. Hello, CQ. Hello, CQ. Hello, CQ. Calling CQ. I sat there until I was red in the face calling CQ. This is W9QWN calling CQ and listening. I developed that real snotty way, you know. And listening, come in there, boom. I'd wait. Of course, the band was one solid mass of heterodynes. I could hear nothing. Just whoo, all the big timers are coming in. It's late at night. And then finally, about 1 o'clock in the morning, I hear this guy calling, hello, W9QWN, W9QWN. This is W8LFD in Cleveland, Ohio, calling, hello, 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 W9. Oh, fantastic moment of total joy. You know how the guys who have reached the top of Mount Everest feel? I know that feeling. I know that feeling of standing on the top of a glacier, looking out over the Himalayas. Nothing but achievement. You can't go anywhere after this. There I sat that night, working guys all over the Midwest with my 10-watt Heising system of modulation. And it wasn't until there was a postscript to this. Years later, I am out of the Army. Years later. Oh, boy, long time afterwards. I am going through a department store. I am home about a week and a half, and I still got my uniform on. And I'm going through a department store in Chicago, and who do I meet but that girl? That same girl. And she's working in one of the big stores. In fact, she was working in Carson, in case you're interested. And there she is. And I couldn't remember the chick's name. And she couldn't remember my name. And she was behind a counter. And we both stood there, and I said, say, Hammond High, didn't you go to Hammond High? She says, yes, of course, you, I remember you. I said, I remember you. Do you remember the... She says, yes, the Aragon. We stood there for a second. And then she finally says, you know, you were kind of a nut. Did your mother ever take you to the doctor or something? See about that? I said, no, that problem's all cleared up now. It's all cleared up. Little did she know that the problem was all cleared up. I was getting upward modulation.
You have been listening to Gene Shepard, the late K2 ORS, as heard on WOR Radio in New York. Happy holidays from all of us here at This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the final DX Corner of 2025. Here's your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B, and let me be the first to offer you Merry Christmas. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll take care of it. So our first update is from Antarctica, LZ0 Alpha, or the South Shetland Islands. LZ1 Alpha Alpha Whiskey, Ivo, is on his way to the South Shetland Islands, where he will be working during the 34th Bulgarian Antarctic Expedition. He plans to be QRV in his spare time as LZ0 Alpha. The dates are from December 28th to February 16th, plus or minus 2 days. Ivo expects to be on 20 meters and possibly other bands, using single sideband and FT8, FT4. The activation is registered under IOTA as reference number AN010 and WAP reference number BUL-01. The territory also falls within the CQ Zone 13, ITU Zone 73, and the DXCC entity Victor Papa 8, which is Lima Uniform, the South Shetland Islands, which, by the way, is number 67 on the Club Log DXCC Most Wanted list. This initiative continues the long-standing tradition of Bulgarian presence and activity in Antarctica. Their work has been essential for maintaining communications between the Bulgarian Antarctic missions and the rest of the world, and has contributed significantly to promoting Bulgarian scientific research on the ice continent. Ivo will continue this legacy during the 34th expedition, and we wish them luck, and I hope you get to work them. Now we have an update from Cambodia, which is X-Ray Uniform. Tom, Delta Lima 7, Bravo Oscar, will be on the air as X-Ray Uniform 7, Golf November Yankee, from December 22nd to January 18th. Tom will be on 160 through 6 meter CW sideband and FT8, concentrating on the lower bands. And you can QSL DL7BO and the XU7GNY operation via Delta Juliet 4 Whiskey Kilo, or use LOTW, Club Log, or EQSL. From Azerbaijan, which is 4 Kilo, we have the following. Jan, 4 Kilo stroke Delta Lima 4 X-Ray Tango, will be on 40 and 20 meters single sideband CW and FT8 December 26th to January 3rd. He will be on the air casually, i.e. holiday style. For QSL, it's got to be LOTW, Club Log, OQRS, and QRZ. We have an update from Africa, Tango Lima, the Central African Republic. Yeho, Charlie Radio 7, Boston November Whiskey, is set for his 6-month Tango Lima 8 Boston November Whiskey operation in Bangu. His first activity has already begun, and he's using single sideband and FT8 on 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters. QSOs will be uploaded to LOTW, QRZ Logbook, and via the Portuguese QSL Bureau. For French Guiana, Fox Yankee, we have the following. Peter, Fox 4 Golf Papa Kilo, will be on as Tango Oscar 2 Fox Yankee from December 22nd to January 15th from Korora, French Guiana. We have another African station from the Gambia, Charlie 5 Yankee Kilo. Andre, Oscar November 7 Yankee Kilo, is QRV from the Gambia until January 25th. He is operating as Charlie 5 Yankee Kilo on sideband, RTTY, PSK, FT8, FT4, and some CW on 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. QSL only via LOTW, EQSL, or direct to ON7YK. He posts his logbook on his website. From Serbia, YU, or Yankee Uniform, we have the following. In celebration of IARU Region 1 Young Radio Operators Month, Serbian amateurs may use the special call signs YT25 YOTA and YU25 YOTA throughout December 2025. That only comes around once in a while, so if you need that prefix or you want to get it, it's a good time to get it. K4DMN Darren will be active in holiday style from December 23rd until January 1st from St. George Island, which is NA-085 activation ID. Activity will be on 80 through 10 meters using mainly FT8. A side trip to Dog Island and St. Vincent is possible, so you should stay tuned. QSL via LOTW and Club Log. And I mentioned at the beginning that W3UR is the only way to get real-time updates, and this would be a great example. If Darren decides that he is going to Dog Island or St. Vincent, typically they'll notify Bernie, and Bernie will send something out. So as you start getting higher in the band slots and the worked countries, you need more real-time information, and that's the way to get it. So for Monaco, which is 3 Alpha, we have the following. Call Mike Mike 0 November Delta X-Ray and Steve Mike Mike 0 Sierra Alpha Juliet will once again be QRV as 3 Alpha stroke MM0 NDX and 3 Alpha stroke MM0 SAJ from December 30th to January 3rd. QRV on various bands and modes. The main focus will be on the low bands in their evenings. QSL both calls to Echo Bravo 7, Delta X-Ray, and LOTW. From Cape Verde Islands, we have the following, which is Delta 4. Benny, HB9HNT, will operate under the call sign Delta 4 November Tango until January 1st of 2026. From Greenland, which is Oscar X-Ray, we have the following. Michael, whose call sign is Oscar X-Ray 3, Mike Charlie, operates out of the Pituffik Space Base in northwest Greenland. His upcoming assignment runs from December 29th to February 25th, 2026. Michael is most active on weekends starting around 0400 Zulu and sometimes works radio in the evenings after 2100 Zulu. Michael likes to work HF sideband on 160 through 10 meters. You can QSL the OX3MC operation via the Dutch OZ Bureau, and he does not use electronic logging. From Azerbaijan, which is 4 Kilo, we have the following. The 4 Kilo Oscar Tango de-expedition and contest team with the Azerbaijan Radio Amateur Society will conduct the first Parks on the Air activation from Shangdag National Park, which is AZ-0006 in Azerbaijan. The event takes place from December 29th to December 31st, 2025 on the 17-meter band, sideband, from Grid Square LN41CH. The DX Metric features a new YouTube episode this coming weekend, a discussion with Carlo, Italy Kilo 1 Hotel Juliet Sierra. We discussed the WWA 2026 contest. This is a great event, perhaps the best kept secret in contesting. Check it out and let me know what you think. And if it's something you want to look at, it starts January 1st, so you want to get ready. If you want to follow all the latest DX podcast and YouTube releases, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of the DX activities. And I always ask you to please subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as the podcast. So we have a new award from the ARL in our contest update section. In 2026, to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the ARRL is launching the America 250 WAS Award, a special Worked All States challenge. To earn this award, participants must confirm two-way contacts with all 50 U.S. states via Logbook of the World between January 1st and December 31st, 2026. There will be special endorsements for contacting W1AW portable stations in each state, achieving triple play, which is all three modes, CW, phone, and digital, and making contests with ARRL-affiliated club call signs. Only contacts confirmed through LOTW account. The award is eligible for purchase and is designed to encourage club activity and celebrate this national milestone. And if you want to do some operating, but you're not a league member, you can still join LOTW and create an account. You can't use it for anything, but you could upload it for the rest of us, and we all appreciate it. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week, and I'll see you in 2026.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. When you start on the journey of putting together a shack, in whatever form that eventually takes, you'll need to figure out how much space is required. Of course, no matter what you choose, it's never enough, but you have to start somewhere. Ultimately, a shack is a work in progress. As an aside, I'm using the word shack, but that is really an amateur concept. So we're not necessarily talking about a plot of land with a wooden lean-to cobbled together from bits of wood collected from your beachcomber days. Not that it can't be that, but it doesn't have to be. As I've said, my shack is a wooden trestle table. I know shacks that are a dedicated room in a house, a converted garage, a garden shed, a warehouse office, a radio station, an outbuilding, several scout halls, demountables, a converted passenger bus, and plenty more. In this context, in referring to shack, I mean the place where my radio lives when I get on air to make noise, but shack runs off the tongue a little easier. Budget aside, in order to attempt to quantify your space requirements, you need to figure out what you're going to do with it. This perhaps sounds a little ludicrous, since the answer is amateur radio. Duh, obviously. Okay, so here's some questions. Does amateur radio for you mean any of the following? Operating the local repeater, HF radio, solo or with visitors, listening to multiple stations, operating multiple bands simultaneously, computers, Morse code, contesting, soldering, building, experimentation, and plenty more. While we're at it, if you're into soldering, is that with valves, discrete components, or integrated circuits? And what levels of existing bits and pieces do you have? I'm asking because the racks of jars, component trays, and drawers I've seen over the past 15 years often rival the actual shack for size. In other words, when you're thinking about what you want to do, be specific. For me, amateur radio is more about computers and less about soldering irons. That's not to say that I don't own a soldering iron, just that its use is incidental rather than fundamental. Computers, keyboards, and monitors, on the other hand, for me, are part and parcel of my amateur radio experience. Truth be told, if I could, I'd try to eliminate all the analog radios from my shack and replace them with a single box capable of wideband operation across the amateur bands that I could control with a computer. I realized that this is not a universal picture of what amateur radio means, but it's what it means for me, because it represents the ultimate level of flexibility. That said, I love my FT857D. I have several other radios that I loan out from time to new amateurs, while they find their feet. I love to experiment with those as well, so my shack needs space for temporary setups. While I enjoy chewing the fat over a cup of coffee, I rarely get on air and make noise with anyone else. That's not because I don't appreciate it, but because I've yet to discover an effective way of filtering interference, a topic for another day. Even if you're not a computer nerd like me, there's a high probability that a shack today includes a computer of some description, for record keeping, propagation forecasts, logging, and digital modes. So it's a good idea to imagine yourself actually doing your planned activities and speculating what kinds of things you'll need. Like, where do you put your cup of coffee, your keyboard, and your Morse key? While we're discussing putting things down, think about the ability to actually use these things, not just where they live. It's no fun balancing a keyboard and trying to reach over the top to change the operating frequency, or having to strain your neck to look at the logging screen when you've made that elusive contact. So think about the ergonomics of what you're planning. Right now, I have a wire shelving unit sitting on my desk. It's 80 centimeters tall, 90 centimeters wide, and 30 centimeters deep. The two shelves are adjustable in height. Currently, one is at the highest point, The other has enough space to fit a base station radio underneath it, about 13 centimeters from the lowest point. It's not ideal since it means that the keyboard is in front of it. During the previous iteration, of which there have been several, my monitors were in front of this and the keyboard was an external one connected to a laptop to the right of the screen, allowing me to have two screens to display information. The idea was that I'd use the computer to control the transceivers using a protocol called CAT. This never happened, so operating was awkward, to say the least, and as a result hardly used. Instead, the FT857D sat on top of the bottom shelf using a sound card to operate on digital modes. A slightly better operating angle were it not for the monitor that hid it from view. As I said, not ideal. I'm mentioning all this to give you a picture of at least one other shack. But in my experience, nothing beats going out to see what others have gotten up to. Of course, you can visit shacks online with the proliferation of photographs proud amateurs have shared. But there's a difference between looking at a photo and walking around someone's physical shack. So keep that in mind. Other space considerations are rarely, if ever, talked about. What space is there left for you to make changes to your shack? You might think that your shack won't change once you've built it. Here's a change: disconnecting the antenna in case of a thunderstorm. Here's another: plugging in a CAT cable, setting up an external speaker, or even buying a new radio. You name it, the shack is never done. So think about the idea of being able to walk behind the radio. If you think that's silly, put the shack on wheels. You'll thank me later. While you're walking behind your equipment, consider coax routing, a topic of its own, but being mindful of the need to actually get the coax from where it enters to your gear and how it relates to any electricity routing required to actually power your gear. One other consideration in relation to space is your chair. How much space does it need? Can you adjust it? Is it on casters or a wooden dining chair? Again, this can be as simple as a dining table, or it can be something more substantial. In my experience, a happier outcome is achieved if you spend some quality time thinking about some of the questions I've proposed. As you might have guessed, there's plenty more to explore. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
The host of a popular YouTube channel that made him Elmer to nearly 53,000 subscribers and viewers has become a silent key. In many of the videos on his channel, Jim Heath, Whiskey 6, Lima Golf, introduces himself as your YouTube Elmer for ham radio basics. In his easygoing, personable style, Jim explained, in plain and basic language, the mysteries of SWR, grounding, antennas, and dummy loads. A popular presence on YouTube, Jim brought users directly into his radio room via a YouTube studio inside his shack. Jim, who had endured years of hospitalizations following a leukemia diagnosis, became a silent key on December 22nd at his California home. He had been a ham since getting his license in 1964 with the call sign Whiskey November 6, Juliet Zulu Charlie. He had held his well-known vanity call sign Whiskey 6, Lima Golf since 2004. He also grew to love chasing DX and counted among his collection the QSL cards of King Hussein of Jordan, Juliet Yankee 1, and Father Marshall D. Morin, 9 November 1, Mike, the first ham operator in Nepal. Jim had also been the owner of High Sierra, which made one of the first screwdriver antennas for mobile HF use. Over much of his adult life, Jim faced numerous health challenges, a disabling fall from a roof in 1998 while working as a building inspector, and a series of health crises later, including pulmonary embolisms, congestive heart failure, and severe osteoporosis. Then came the news he had leukemia. In his final months, he appeared on Hamstarter, the YouTube channel of Vince Dion, Victor Echo 6, Lima Kilo, and the two became friends. Vince described Jim as a good friend to many and an Elmer to all. Announcing Jim's death, Vince urged hams to continue visiting the W6 Lima Golf channel so they can learn from the best.
Hello, and welcome to the next chapter in a new series here on This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, TWIAR's historian. From the most interesting mind of Philip Nedlinger KA4KOE comes Dead Electrical Dudes, in which he takes a fascinating and humorous look at the movers and shakers that helped kindle our amateur radio hobby and other radio-related stuff. This is a truly radical glance at the past of radio development. Philip has presented these dudes on EHAM over the last several years and has kindly granted us permission to use his materials here on This Week in Amateur Radio. And so we continue with Dead Electrical Dudes number 2. This chapter's stiff, Nikola Tesla, entered mortal coil 10 July 1856, assumed room temperature 7 January 1943. Presented for your listening pleasure, we have Dead Electrical Dude number 2, Mr. Nikola Tesla, i.e. Sparky, since he had an affinity for large electrical discharges. Mr. Tesla invented many of the electrical devices and systems in widespread use today. It is interesting to note that the man started out his professional career as an electrical engineer with Budapest's version of Ma Bell. Tesla's contraptions and wild ideas resulted in some amazing toys being thrust upon mankind. Note the following highly abbreviated list of just a small sampling of his innovations. Alternating polyphase current distribution. Tesla's AC system won out over Thomas Edison's DC system. In retaliation against his former employee, Edison staged public demonstrations of the lethality of alternating current by electrocuting dogs. If Edison's DC system had won out, we'd in all likelihood still be in the dark, literally. Imagine huge storage batteries surrounded by fences every few city blocks. Tesla joined forces with Westinghouse, and the rest is, as they say, history. Induction motor. This item is considered to be one of the greatest inventions of all time. Fluorescent light. Fluorescent lighting is now considered the standard for energy-efficient illumination, relegating incandescent sources to secondary status. Tesla coil. Versions of this device are used in your television set's high-voltage deflection coils. These coils are responsible for moving that little electron beam around ever so fast. Really large Tesla coils can generate impressive artificial lightning bolts. Cool stuff. Tesla held patents for elementary radio apparatus, in particular the use of tuned circuits. Marconi built the first viable radio system using technology described by Tesla. In all, Tesla held 700 U.S. patents for his devices. Note, however, that the inventor did have a weird side. Some of Tesla's quirks included the following. Tesla claimed to have received signals from another planet using one of the devices in his laboratory. Sparky never married. How many homely geeks do you know who fit this picture? Tesla also claimed to have invented a death ray that could destroy 10,000 enemy aircraft from a distance of 250 miles. We may never know the veracity of this claim, since all of Tesla's papers were confiscated by the feds at the time of his death during World War II. Tesla lived the last 10 years of his life in a two-room suite on the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker, room 3327. Edward Armstrong, the inventor of the superheterodyne receiver and FM, said of his colleague, "The world will wait a long time for Nikola Tesla's equal in achievement and imagination." Philip agrees with the late Mr. Armstrong. As a final tribute to the man and his achievements, the unit of magnetic flux density, the Tesla, was named in his honor. Used in the preparation of this chapter, the Nikola Tesla Memorial website, www.teslasociety.com. With thanks to Philip Nettlinger, KA4KOE, for allowing us to use his materials, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. December was a busy month. South Korea launched their satellites, and the ISS deployed 5 CubeSats at the beginning of the month. The ones operating on amateur frequencies are SilverSat, RHOK-Sat, Content Cube, EagleSat-2, and Forest Prominio. SilverSat automatically relays images and telemetry to its ground network, which is then posted to social media. The CW beacon was heard sending at 16 words per minute under the call sign WP2XGW. RHOK-Sat has telemetry on 435.425 MHz using 9600 FSK, while Content Cube is using 437.020 MHz GMSK for its telemetry. EagleSat 2 uses 437.165 MHz and 19K2 GFSK for its data from two experiments. One is the Cosmic Ray Payload and the other Memory Degradation Experiment. Finally, 4S Prominio is transmitting telemetry on 437.400 MHz. As this is our last report before the Christmas holiday, I would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season on behalf of AMSAT and myself. I hope you make that DX contact or satellite contact you were hoping for. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
Think satellites are immune to seasons? Well, think again. They experience orbital summer and orbital winter with extreme effects. Because of the position of the Earth as well as the orbital path, satellites experience periods when they are entirely out of Earth's shadow, or orbital summer, and periods when they are in eclipse for most or all of their orbits, or orbital winter. What does this mean for the batteries and temperature? When fully illuminated, solar panels are generating nonstop power and batteries are fully charged. But orbital summer isn't just about light, it's about heat. Without the shadow of an eclipse to cool down, the satellite heats up, putting stress on batteries and other components. Conversely, when orbital winter happens, a satellite will experience maximum eclipse time. When in eclipse, batteries may not charge sufficiently. Satellites must survive long periods in the dark, relying heavily on batteries and internal heaters to keep them from freezing. Orbital summer and orbital winter are primary contributors to satellite failure and a major challenge to those who build and operate satellites of all types.
It is time for AMSAT's satellite shorts from all over, and once again they are all really short. First, AO 123's FM transponder has been back in operation periodically over the past week. The uplink for the FM transponder is 145.850 MHz with a 67 Hz CTC-SS, and the downlink is 435.400 MHz. Next, on December 18, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order entitled Ensuring American Space Superiority. In this order, the President announced the policy of the U.S. government is to return Americans to the moon by 2028 through the Artemis program and to establish the initial elements of a permanent lunar outpost by 2030 to ensure a sustained American presence in space and enable the next steps in Mars exploration. And finally, on December 17, 2025, the U.S. Senate confirmed the nomination of Jared Isaacman to be the administrator of NASA by a vote of 67 to 30. Isaacman took office as the NASA administrator the following day.
The 2026 Southeast VHF Society Conference will be held on April 16 through the 19th in Macon, Georgia. All interested in VHF and above amateur operations are invited to attend. The conference will begin on a Thursday night social at the local establishment. The technical conference begins Friday morning and will include a luncheon with a guest speaker and continued technical presentations in the afternoon. The conference events continue with an evening flea market and hospitality suite. Saturday morning, the technical presentations continue and conclude early afternoon when the antenna range and rover display opens. The conference ends with an in-house banquet, including a guest speaker, awards, and door prize giveaway. Please visit www.svhfs.org for further details, which will include hotel and conference registration details and a call for papers.
Higher levels of carbon dioxide, CO2, in the Earth's atmosphere could harm radio communications by enhancing a disruptive effect in the ionosphere. According to researchers at Kyushu University in Japan, who modeled the effect numerically for the first time, This little-known consequence of climate change could have significant impacts on shortwave radio systems, such as those employed in broadcasting, air traffic control, and navigation. While increasing CO2 levels in the atmosphere warm the Earth's surface, they actually cool the ionosphere, explains study leader Hushu Leo of Kyushu's Faculty of Science. This cooling doesn't mean it is all good. It decreases the air density in the ionosphere and accelerates wind circulation. These changes affect the orbits and lifespans of satellites and space debris and also disrupt radio communications through localized small-scale plasma irregularities. These results are exciting because they show that the impacts of CO2 increase can extend all the way from Earth's surface to altitudes at which HF and VHF radio waves propagate and communication satellites orbit, Liu tells Physics World. This may be good news for ham radio amateurs, as you will likely receive more signals from faraway countries more often. For radio communications, however, especially at HF and VHF frequencies employed for aviation, ships, and rescue operations, it means more noise and frequent disruptions in communications and hence safety. The telecommunication industry might therefore need to adjust their frequencies or facility design in the future, he concluded.
Schools and other educational institutions who have enjoyed student contacts with astronauts on board the International Space Station already know the value of this respected program. It places an emphasis on science and radio education and gives a window into how ham radio works as a powerful educational tool. Now everyone can experience communication, at least one-way communication, with a NASA astronaut in a new video released by NASA, the U.S. Space Agency. In a little less than 4 minutes, the NASA video features astronaut Nicolich Ayers and KJ5GWI explaining to viewers how school contacts are made with the help of ham radio operators around the world. Addressing students directly, she says that the contacts are meaningful but necessarily brief because the ISS is moving around the Earth at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. The video was recorded appropriately during Expedition 73, which launched in the spring of this year. The video is available on YouTube.
A $25,000 grant from the Northern California DX Foundation is being provided to the team heading to Sable Island in March for the CY0S activation. According to the team's website, the dates have been set for March 19th through the 31st. The team leaders are Murray, WA4DAN, and Glenn, W0GJ, who will operate alongside veteran D-expeditioners Pat, N2IEN, Lee, WW2DX, Ralph, K0IR, Jay, K4ZLE, Mike, K9NW, and Scott, NE9U. In a comment on the DXNews.com website, Murray acknowledged the Northern California DX Foundation's ongoing support for various DXpeditions like this one, support that spans a period of more than 33 years. Sable Island weather is expected to be a challenge at the time the team's airplane arrives. It is usually a cold and snowy time, sometimes with gale force winds. The island is about 300 kilometers or 186 miles east of Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Hams in Vermont, who have been members of the recently dismantled Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, or RACES, have begun joining the team at the Medical Reserve Corps of the state's Department of Health. According to Kate Hammond, KC1DUY, the manager of the Medical Reserve Corps Communications Section, Vermont's shift in deployment of radio volunteers is part of a changeover going on in many states. She said in an email that emergency communications is emerging as a Medical Reserve Corps mission in more states, but the creation of the mission set in Vermont is a work that's specific to them. She said that towards the end, John Colt, NV1Y, the hospital net coordinator for the Medical Reserve Corps, and Heather Rigney, KC1PMR, the Corps statewide coordinator, are overseeing the creation of documents for the newly configured team. Former RACES materials are being used to help guide future practices of Medical Reserve Corps operators, who will attend orientation meetings soon. The Vermont Healthcare Net has also become more active. Kate said that members will be affiliated with one of 8 local Medical Reserve Corps units for any drill or event, which could be deployed as well to shelters when a communications outage occurs. Although Josh Cohen, KB1NIJ, a long-term RACES member and an experienced net control operator, said he's sorry to see the RACES program go, but he's preparing to join the Medical Reserve Corps team. Josh is among many hams eager to continue using their skills.
NASA ended months of speculation about the next flight of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, confirming that the vehicle will carry only cargo to the International Space Station. NASA and Boeing are now targeting no earlier than April 2026 to fly the uncrewed Starliner 1 mission, the space agency said. Launching by next April will require completion of rigorous test, certification, and mission readiness activities, NASA added in a statement. Starliner's first flight in December 2019 without crew had to be truncated after the software problems plagued the vehicle. It was nearly lost shortly after launch, as well as before atmospheric re-entry. It did not make a planned rendezvous with the space station. The second mission, Orbital Flight Test 2, took place in May 2022. Because of problems on the previous mission, this spacecraft also flew uncrewed. The flight was more successful, reaching the space station despite some thruster issues. NASA then spent more than 2 years testing Starliner on the ground before its first crewed flight in 2024. Carrying NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, KD-5PLB. During its approach to the space station, the Starliner spacecraft once again experienced serious thruster issues. However, the life and death nature of this flight was not revealed until nearly a year later. Starliner ultimately docked with the station, but after heated deliberations, NASA informed Boeing that the vehicle would return to Earth uncrewed. As a result, a Dragon mission was launched later in 2024, carrying just 2 astronauts instead of a full complement of 4. This allowed for the safe return of Wilmore and Williams in March of 2025.
An Australian company wants to join efforts to study a rare space event conducting its own flyby of the asteroid Apophis when it makes close approach to Earth in 2029. Sydney-based HEO Robotics, a provider of commercial satellites to satellite imagery, wants to add to the international missions already planning to get up close to the 340-meter asteroid Apophis as it zooms by Earth in April 2029 by buying a satellite near the end of its life up in geostationary orbit and use its remaining fuel. Satellites in the geostationary belt, or GEO, orbit 35,786 kilometers above the equator. Spacecraft nearing the end of their lives use their remaining fuel to head into a so-called graveyard orbit above GEO to take themselves out of the way of operational satellites. HEO aims to buy a satellite near the end of its mission lifetime and, using a little more fuel than needed for the graveyard trip, make a close approach to Apophis, which will pass within the GEO belt when it makes its close approach to Earth on Friday, April 13, 2029.
In our final story this week, the sudden assembly of thousands of people in one small, rural, 16-block-long Minnesota town in early December spurred swift and careful action from first responders and amateur radio operators. But this was no community in crisis. It was a celebration. The small town of Arlington, Minnesota is always happy to welcome newcomers, particularly at its annual holiday festival, Arlie Dazzle. No doubt there were first-timers among those attending in the estimated crowd size of 10,000 people who arrived on December 5th and 6th feeling the holiday spirit. Perhaps more importantly, the newcomers included 10 ham radio operators, 6 of them newly licensed technicians with handy-talkies in hand as part of the team of more than 34 hams who volunteered to ensure that everybody enjoyed this holiday tradition. Don Burgess, KC0QNA, the emergency radio coordinator for Sibley County, said in an email, "This town event is one that a lot of my radio team really looks forward to doing each year, regardless of temperatures or weather conditions." The local police chief looks to us as his reserve officers in many aspects, and we never let him or the community down. He said the hams traveled from as far away as Minneapolis and St. Paul, the so-called Twin Cities, an hour away, to make sure things went smoothly, from setting up barricades for the 5K runners to setting up light generators for the parade route. The Sibley Emergency Radio Team Club, with Don as safety and logistics coordinator, have provided that reassuring presence for the past 16 years. The team is no stranger to community service at dozens of public events, even in nearby towns such as Gaylord. This festival is one that's special, said Don. It really takes on the mom and pop old days family Christmas vibes for sure. This team is happy to lend mom and pop a hand.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is streamed on the internet, broadcast on low-power FM, and heard on nets and repeaters all around the world, like the K2IWR repeater operated by the Skyline Amateur Radio Club on 147.180 MHz in Cortland, New York, where This Week in Amateur Radio is heard each Tuesday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to have your club's repeater announced on This Week in Amateur Radio, send us an email with all the pertinent information to w2xbs77@gmail.com. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.